Is the Matrix real? What even is the Matrix? And if you knew that you could control the Matrix and bend reality to your will, would you even want to escape the Matrix? So, first of all, what is the Matrix? If we look at how it's portrayed in the movie The Matrix with Keanu Reeves, the main character Neo, he goes through life, but he always has this nagging feeling that things are not real in the respect that we normally think of things being real. And of course, he later then meets Morpheus, who gives him the opportunity to take a red pill that will allow him to wake up. I suppose it's like an awakening and see what real base reality is. And of course, it's very shocking in the movie because he wakes up and he's in this kind of battery-like pod with these things plugged into his head, and he is effectively feeding, these kind of aliens that have taken over the planet. Now, in our terms, you could argue that the Matrix is kind of like a lot of us go to work every day doing a job that you don't necessarily love, but we have to do it to pay our bills. We all pay our taxes. We're in a world where, certainly in the Western world, it seems to be better that you're either very poor and everything is kind of provided for you, or you're very rich and you can then hire very good accountants and you can avoid tax and all these kind of things. But the most of us, the sort of the other 95% of us, seem to be stuck in this rut where we're kind of paying and funding for everything, but never really seem to have any spare time or any money to do what we want. So it is real, but is it real in the true sense of the word? Now, real, as Morpheus says in the movie, is what do you define as real? If it's things that you can touch, that you can taste, but these are effectively based on electronic signals that are feeding your brain. They're creating the image or the sensory feeling in your brain, in your mind, like a receptor, really. Now, when you think about something like an atom, we think of things as real, as kind of physical things that we can touch. But an atom is made up, basically, 99.9999% of it is just empty space. It's just air. And the only reason why it feels solid is because everything is vibrating at such a rate that it feels solid to the touch, because it's like your finger. If I moved it left and right very quickly, it's going to give the impression that I can't put my finger through it. It's solid simply because it's going at such a rate. And maybe this is where the whole thing about having a vibration and connecting your brain to your heart. Your brain is what creates the frequency, and then your heart is what boosts that frequency to attract what it is you want into your life. So the Matrix is real, but the argument is we are just a projection of the real reality that is being controlled outside of the simulation. So we are in a simulation, we're in this computer, and there are many things that would suggest that we're in a computer. For example, based on quantum physics, we only see what we're actually looking at, what we're observing at that time, which is exactly how a computer game works. And everything in our planet is pretty much based on mathematics, whether it's time, energy, density, gravity, light is all mathematical, which is exactly, a computer program is effectively based on maths. Now, in the movie, of course, they talk about escaping the Matrix, to get to base reality. But assuming we can't actually get out of this simulation, if we're in a computer program that's being run, you can't somehow climb out of the computer. But what you can do is, once you realize that we're in a simulation and you can control it, it's very much like if you've ever had the fortune of being in a dream. You're having a nice dream, and then suddenly, for some reason, and this has only happened to me a handful of times in my life, but you actually realize that you're dreaming, and you think, okay, if I'm dreaming and this is not real, then you're no longer bound by typical physics that you would have in the real world. I think most people, it's very common that when you realise you're dreaming, the first thing that a lot of people seem to want to do is fly. And I remember distinctly having this dream where I sort of jump in the air, but then I can just suspend myself in midair and just taking great delight in watching people's reactions, when I don't come back down and I'm just sort of floating around and then sort of flying off kind of like Superman. And it's an amazing dream. And it's one of those that typically you wake up from and then you're like, oh, I'd love to get back to dreaming about that. And you're trying to get back to sleep. And of course, you never end up going back to the same dream or even dreaming at all. But in our terms, when you realize that you don't have to do these things that you've always been doing that you don't like doing, because effectively a lot of us go through life in a dreamlike state. We never really stop and decide what it is that we want to do and steer our life. A lot of us just kind of fall into things. I've ended up doing jobs because I bumped into them and then they said, oh, we're looking for somebody. And then I said, yeah, okay, that sounds good. I'm not doing anything at the moment. And then I just go off and do that job, and it could be end up doing it for years and stuff. Or you bump into somebody and you end up maybe having a relationship with them or something. But there are a lot of things that we do that we don't really plan. And that's because we never really have the time to sit down and get off the merry-go-round and really decide and put out an intention, what we want, and then take steps to move towards that particular goal. So taking that further, if we're in a simulation, we're part of a computer program, you can effectively decide what you want to do, but kind of reprogram the matrix through vibration, through putting out this kind of program, reprogramming your brain, if you like, to attract the things in your life that you want. So the matrix exists, but it's not real in the sense that we normally talk about real. The real world, people always say, oh, well, in the real world, you can't do this and you can't do that. Because we're governed by all these laws of physics and what is possible. But when you look at people that are very successful, like them or not, they don't think about impossibilities. They just believe that everything is possible. And then it might be a self-fulfilling prophecy, but by not thinking they're bound by those restrictions that most people do, and also not worrying as much about the consequences. So treat your life like it's a computer game. If you're playing a game and you've got to jump over this chasm, it might be annoying that if you fall down it and you don't quite make the jump, but you don't worry about it. You're not scared about it per se. And I think in life, we go through life being so worried about things, about being worried about the consequences. And often these are things that will never happen anyway. As a human, we often think the worst. We come up with all these reasons why something's not going to work, or what would happen if I changed jobs, or, would I lose my house? Will I be on the streets? And you go through all these crazy scenarios and things like that. Whereas if we maybe were just a bit braver and just tried things, just trying something and just deciding and really having that intention and giving it your all, not thinking about plan B, plan C, but just really going for it. So love to hear your thoughts. Drop any comments about what you think about this theory. Do you find yourself restricted and you're always kind of talking yourself out of things? Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video or you got anything out of it, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.